It was a chilly afternoon in London, November 1, 2006, around 4:45 p.m., when Alexander Litvinenko's life was brutally cut short. He had been sipping tea at the Millennium Hotel in Mayfair, surrounded by old friends, when he suddenly doubled over in agony. The room seemed to freeze in horror as Litvinenko's eyes widened in shock, his face contorted in a mixture of pain and terror. His wife, Marina, frantically called for an ambulance, but it was too late. Litvinenko's body began to shut down, and he crumpled to the floor. The scene was one of utter chaos as the people in the room scrambled to comprehend what was happening. The sound of shattering glass and screams filled the air as Litvinenko's friends rushed to his side. The hotel's opulent decor seemed to fade into the background as the reality of the situation set in. Litvinenko's wife, Marina, was oblivious to the cameras and smartphones capturing every moment, her sole focus on the man she loved. The room's warmth and hospitality turned to cold, bitter reality as the unthinkable happened. Alexander Litvinenko, a former Russian spy turned whistleblower, was a man driven by bravery and conviction. His piercing eyes and sharp mind had seen the darkest corners of human nature. He had spent years working for the Russian Federal Security Service, FSB, witnessing the inner workings of a corrupt regime. But when he defected to the UK, Litvinenko became a thorn in the side of the Russian government, a constant reminder of their wrongdoings. He had spoken out against Vladimir Putin, accusing him of orchestrating a string of high-profile murders. His life was now in grave danger. Witnesses described the scene as one of pandemonium, with guests screaming and running for cover. Some claimed to have seen a mysterious figure in a bar at the hotel, who seemed out of place amidst the bustling atmosphere. Others reported hearing a faint noise, like a whisper or a muffled cough, just moments before Litvinenko's collapse. The sound of shattering glass still echoed in their minds, a stark reminder of the horror that had unfolded before their eyes. It was a moment that would haunt them forever. Before we go further, a quick reminder to our valued subscribers. If you want to stay up to date with the latest true crime cases, be sure to hit subscribe and the bell. We post new cases every single day, so there's always something fresh to look forward to. Let me take you back to the very beginning of this story, to the events that led to Litvinenko's shocking demise. It was in the late 1990s when Litvinenko and several other Russian intelligence officers made the bombshell allegation that they had been ordered to kill Boris Berezovsky, a Russian businessman with close ties to the government. This daring move marked the beginning of Litvinenko's downward spiral, as the Russian government began to retaliate against him. He would eventually flee to the UK, where he would share his knowledge with British and Spanish intelligence about the Russian mafia's operations in Europe. As we delve deeper into the story of Alexander Litvinenko's tragic fate, we'll explore his complex past, his connections to the Russian government, and the events that led to his poisoning. We'll examine the evidence and witness testimonies, following the trail of clues that point to a sinister plot. Join me as we unravel the shocking tale of one man's bravery and the ruthless forces that ultimately led to his downfall. We'll examine the motives of the perpetrators and the role of the Russian government in the poisoning. We'll also explore the impact of Litvinenko's death on international relations between Russia and the UK. Alexander Litvinenko, a man who would leave an indelible mark on history, was born in 1962 in the city of Chisinau, currently known as Chisinau, the capital of Moldova. At the time of his death, he was 43 years old and a resident of the United Kingdom, where he was granted asylum after fleeing Russia in the late 2000s. Litvinenko was a former officer of the Russian Federal Security Service, or FSB, a successor to the infamous Soviet-era KGB. This service had a profound impact on his life, shaping his experiences, relationships, and, ultimately, his destiny. Before his departure from Russia, Litvinenko had been living in Moscow. Litvinenko lived a life marked by service, duty, and a strong sense of loyalty, first to Russia, and later to the United Kingdom. As a member of the FSB, he was responsible for gathering intelligence and enforcing national security. After defecting, he worked in close collaboration with British intelligence agencies, sharing his expertise and helping to unravel the complex web of connections between Russian mafia and government officials. Despite his high-stress profession, Litvinenko was known for his warm personality, often displaying a dry sense of humor and a deep affection for his family. He was a devoted husband, father, and friend, who cherished the simple pleasures in life, like spending time with loved ones over a good meal. Alexander Litvinenko was a man of great courage, driven by a strong sense of conviction and a deep commitment to truth. Throughout his life, he spoke out against corruption and injustice, often putting himself in harm's way to do so. His charisma and unwavering dedication to his cause inspired many to take a stand against systemic abuse of power. Despite the risks, Litvinenko remained steadfast in his commitment to exposing the truth, even when it put him and those around him in danger. This willingness to take a stand made him a hero to many, but it also earned him many enemies. Litvinenko's relationships were marked by a deep sense of trust and loyalty. In the UK, he formed close bonds with British intelligence officials, as well as other Russian defectors who shared his desire for truth and justice. He also maintained strong ties with his family, including his wife, Marina, and their young son, Anatoly. However, his connections to Russian officials were strained, and his criticism of Vladimir Putin had created deep divisions within the government. As tensions rose, Litvinenko found himself increasingly isolated, with few people to turn to for support. But it was precisely this isolation that would prove so perilous in the months leading up to his tragic demise. In the fall of 2006, Litvinenko's world began to unravel in a way that would have far-reaching consequences. Over the months, he had been growing increasingly vocal in his criticism of Putin and the Russian government, a stance that had not gone unnoticed by the powers that be. Despite the risks, Litvinenko remained unwavering in his commitment to exposing the truth, even as the danger grew more palpable. As the seasons changed, Litvinenko's warnings of an impending threat seemed to fall on deaf ears. His loved ones, however, began to notice changes in his behavior, subtle at first, but growing more pronounced with each passing day. The first warning signs that something was seriously wrong came on November 1, 2006, when Litvinenko fell ill, complaining of a metallic taste in his mouth and numbness in his tongue. His wife, Marina, was shocked by the sudden change in his condition, but even she was not prepared for the horrors that were to come. As his condition rapidly deteriorated, Litvinenko's loved ones were left reeling, struggling to comprehend the full extent of the danger they were facing. The first emergency calls were made to the National Health Service, but it was clear that Litvinenko's illness was no ordinary case. Little did they know, the clock was ticking, and his fate was sealed. Who noticed Litvinenko's condition first? It was his business partner, Dmitry Kovtun, who had been with him just days before the poisoning. Yet, as news of Litvinenko's illness spread, Kovtun's own involvement in the poisoning would come under scrutiny. Others, like Andrei Lugovoy, also stood accused of playing a role in Litvinenko's demise, but their claims of innocence would be met with widespread skepticism. In the days that followed, Marina Litvinenko would become the voice of her late husband's story, fighting tirelessly for justice and the truth. How would she navigate the treacherous waters of international politics, corruption, and deceit? But as the hours ticked by, Marina's worst fears were confirmed. Litvinenko's condition was catastrophic, and he was fighting for his life. As the world watched in horror, the news of his poisoning sent shockwaves through the diplomatic community, straining relations between the UK and Russia to the breaking point. Amidst the chaos, the Litvinenko family faced an impossible decision: what to do next. Would Marina be able to secure justice for her husband, or would the forces of corruption and power silence her forever? As the investigation into Litvinenko's death gathered momentum, the world was left with more questions than answers. Who was behind the poisoning, and what was their motive? Was it a state-sponsored assassination, or a crime committed by rogue actors? As the search for the truth continued, one thing was clear: Alexander Litvinenko's death would not go unpunished. But what role would his loved ones, particularly Marina, play in exposing the truth? What secrets lay hidden behind the facade of international cooperation and diplomacy? As the UK and Russia engaged in a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, Marina Litvinenko found herself at the center of a maelstrom, her family's lives forever changed by the tragedy that had befallen them. And yet, in the face of unimaginable adversity, she remained resolute, her commitment to uncovering the truth unshakable. Would investigators be able to follow the trail of evidence to its source, or would the complexity of the case prove too great to overcome? As Marina Litvinenko took up the mantle of her husband's legacy, she became a beacon of hope for those fighting against corruption and injustice. Her determination would inspire a new generation of activists and investigators, who would strive to bring perpetrators to justice no matter the cost. But for Marina Litvinenko, the road ahead would be long and arduous, fraught with obstacles and challenges that would test her resolve to the limit. Yet, even in the darkest moments, she found strength in the knowledge that her husband's sacrifice would not be in vain. His fight for truth and justice. On a cold November morning, 1st, 2006, the streets of London were bustling with life as the city woke up to another grey day. It was a chilly 8 degrees Celsius, with a gentle fog rolling in off the Thames. Litvinenko had just finished a business meeting with a friend at the Millennium Hotel in Grosvenor Square. As he was sipping on a cup of green tea at the hotel's Pine Bar, he couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. It was a sense of unease that would soon turn into a nightmare. In the months leading up to his poisoning, Litvinenko had been receiving death threats from his former colleagues in Russia. He had been a thorn in their side, exposing the dark secrets of the FSB and criticizing President Putin's regime. Litvinenko's allegations about the Russian government's involvement in a series of terrorist attacks, including the Moscow apartment bombings, had made him a target. He had sought protection from the British authorities, but his requests had been largely ignored. Meanwhile, his friends and family were growing increasingly concerned for his safety. The sequence of events that followed Litvinenko's poisoning is still shrouded in mystery. He had been feeling unwell for about an hour, experiencing vomiting and severe abdominal pain. His friends and colleagues were quick to notice the change, but they didn't know what was happening. Then, he stumbled out of the hotel and collapsed in the lobby. An ambulance was called, and Litvinenko was rushed to University College London Hospital. His condition rapidly deteriorated, and he was placed in an induced coma. The doctors were baffled by his symptoms, which seemed to be a combination of radiation poisoning and a severe case of food poisoning. As Litvinenko's condition worsened, the medical team discovered the shocking truth: he had been poisoned with a lethal dose of polonium-210, a radioactive substance that is highly toxic and almost impossible to detect. The news sent shockwaves through the medical community, and the police were called in to investigate. The source of the poison was still unknown, but the evidence pointed to a deliberate act of murder. This was a crime like no other, a poison so rare, that it would change the course of the investigation forever. Litvinenko's friend and bodyguard, Andrei Lugovoy, was the first to discover what had happened. He had been with Litvinenko at the hotel and had noticed that his friend was acting strangely. But even he had no idea what was happening until the doctors revealed the shocking truth. Lugovoy was horrified and immediately contacted the authorities. He would later become a key witness in the investigation, but his involvement in Litvinenko's death would also raise questions about his own involvement. Comment below, what do you think really happened here? Was it a targeted assassination, or just a tragic accident? Theories are abound.